Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, so today we are dissecting what has to be one of the absolute most astonishing arrivals in all of European history. Picture this. It's 1429 and a teenage peasant girl just steps into the royal French court. Now look, we all know the legend, right? Joan of Arc becoming the absolute centerpiece of France's desperate survival. But if we strip away the myth for a second, how exactly did she pull that off mechanically? Like, how did that actually work? Let's really peel back the layers on this because, structurally speaking, it is a massive historical paradox. I mean, think about it. How does a young, untrained, completely illiterate peasant effectively take command of an army? An army filled with hardened, deeply cynical combat veterans, no less. To really understand the mechanics of this impossible scenario, we gotta look past that glowing, saintly aura of Joan of Arc and examine the gritty, on-the-ground reality of her leadership, and maybe more importantly, the actual people who chose to follow her. So, to set the scene for you, the French court in 1429 wasn't exactly known for its progressive open-door policy. It was brutally rigid. They were completely obsessed with noble bloodlines and combat pedigrees. Plus, the French cause in the Hundred Years' War was just plagued by this deep hesitation and total despair. And then, right into this exhausted, cynical echo chamber, walks Joan, a teenager from the tiny village of Reims. She has zero formal education and absolutely no military training. Nothing.
Just look at the sheer scale of the mismatch here. It's actually almost comical. On one side, you've got a teenage peasant claiming her authority comes from divine voices, sent directly by God to crown a king. I mean, imagine pitching that to a medieval board of directors. And on the other side, the French military. These are noblemen with decades of brutal, blood-soaked experience who are utterly cynical from years and years of devastating losses. It is just a complete, fundamental clash of worlds.
Yet against all odds, the atmosphere completely fractures and shifts. Once Joan actually enters the military world, these grizzled veteran commanders, guys who had spent literally decades fighting the English, actually begin to listen. And then they follow. Now, she wasn't just some mascot to them, not at all. She brought this fierce, almost terrifying moral clarity that acted as a direct antidote to the absolute despair that was weighing down the French army. You really have to think about the sheer force of personality required to make this happen. Military discipline suddenly improves, morale skyrockets out of nowhere, and these cynical soldiers actually find themselves believing again. This wasn't just about her delivering, pretty speeches. It was about injecting raw, undeniable purpose into a broken machine that had completely forgotten how to function, let alone how to actually win a war. But to really grasp how this worked on the ground, day to day, you have to look at the people flanking her. And the ultimate case study here is a man named Jean d'Alone. He was a seasoned nobleman and an incredibly experienced soldier, and he was appointed to serve her directly. He essentially becomes the living, breathing bridge between Joan's divine visions and the incredibly gritty logistical reality of a medieval war camp. And his position wasn't just symbolic either. d'Alone was her direct bodyguard, her tactical assistant, and her logistics manager, all rolled into one. He kept her alive during totally chaotic battles, he coordinated troop movements, and he ensured her safety through some brutally exhausting sieges. It brilliantly illustrates how Joan's spiritual fire was actually anchored by the strict, hyper-practical logistics of the hardened professionals who were keeping her moving. This totally unique partnership hit its ultimate crucible during what we can call the Campaign of Belief. This follows this staggering reversal at Orléans. Now, Orléans was a city that was literally days away from total collapse. Joan's leadership in breaking that siege was a game changer. It transformed her from this weird, local curiosity into a terrifying, undeniable national symbol almost overnight. And the pacing of this campaign is just breathless. In early 1429, she arrives at court. By May, she absolutely shatters the siege of Orléans, which sends shockwaves across Europe. Then they push straight into the Loire campaign, and by late 1429, they're marching on Reims to officially crown Charles VII. And through this entire deadly sprint of victories, d'Alone is the one managing the frankly terrifying reality of moving a teenage visionary through an active war zone. Contemporary accounts constantly highlight d'Alone's fierce, unwavering loyalty. I mean, he rode right beside her in the vanguard, right in the thick of combat. He stood guard outside her tent at night to keep her safe. And decades later, long after her tragic death, it was actually d'Alone who stepped forward at her posthumous rehabilitation trial. He provided the first-hand accounts that ultimately cleared her name and restored her historical reputation forever. Now, of course, because human nature is what it is, later generations looked at this incredibly intense bond between a teenage visionary and her dedicated older bodyguard and, well, they tried to recast it as a romance. But the historical records point to something entirely different. And honestly, it's something much, much more powerful. The whole romantic angle is just a complete myth, basically invented by later generations looking for a fairy tale. The reality? Their bond was built entirely on a shared radical belief. He believed in her mission, yes, but mostly he believed in her sheer ability to actually win. In a brutal war defined by endless exhaustion and staggering loss, having that kind of shared conviction, that was worth way more than armor. So it really comes down to this. Through figures like Dalan, Joan's abstract authority took on a tangible form. Together, they turned faith into action and vision into victory. Joan undoubtedly provided the spark, but it was the gritty, loyal execution by veterans like Dalan that literally weaponized her faith into history-altering victories. It's just an incredible dynamic. It was this brief, truly extraordinary window where radical belief completely dismantled decades of pure cynicism. Which leaves us with a fascinating question for today. In our own eras of exhaustion, when you find yourself surrounded by hesitation, what core belief is powerful enough to make you step up and fundamentally change the atmosphere in your own world? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.